We have had a very rich presentation, and I'm told by the forum organizers that that certainly has encouraged people to ask many questions. It's my duty to inform you that time is pressing, and I have been told that we would not be able to accommodate most of the questions, and the organizers have selected a few centered around education, which I will be asking the panelists. Before doing that, it seems to me from the presentations that we all would agree that belief in itself is not a problem. In fact, the belief and the believing that it encourages provides us with very sound foundations for a peaceful coexistence and for living together. It is, however, a different thing when that believing also gets translated into belonging. And that is when we face this dilemma of us and them. Now, if that belonging, it seems from the presentations, is rooted in our beliefs, then it should be a way to understand the divine plan of heterogeneity, of diversity. But if it is not handled with care, it can lead to narrow chauvinisms, to extremisms of one kind or the other. And since, if I hope you agree with me that this might be a fair distillation of a more general principle that belief in itself is good, but if belief is not properly handled, it can create negative belongings, almost like supporting my football club against your football club. That could be a problem. And in that sense, I think perhaps it is appropriate that we stick to the questions on education and to see what we can learn from there. Now, there are two here which I'll read out because I think they are interrelated, and then invite the panelists to comment on those. The image of the other is first introduced to young people, to children at a very early age. And do you agree that we really need to focus our attention on children and young people? And then if you do, then please share with us from your perspective the most effective ways of doing this. I would add to this a supplementary which has been asked in a sense, what do you think about the multi-perspectives approach in writing textbooks as we, and that is the group of experts of UNESCO, ESESCO, and the Arab League, have adopted in the guidebook for history, the approach Common Path? Who would wish to start? Maybe we'll go from the right, and Professor, would you like to?
Thank you.
Briefly, and I'll just go to.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that the multi-perspective approach to writing textbooks is a very important point. And if I might add, one of very deep concern to the Hindu tradition, because in the United States, for example, where I work and teach, we have been struggling for quite a while now with predominant stereotyping of the Hindu tradition, where the tradition is identified almost entirely with the social hierarchy of caste or with idolatry, so that many students who study in classrooms find it very difficult to see themselves accurately represented in those academic works. So that while not compromising the scholarly significance of writing textbooks, I think it's very important that the voice of the community be an important partner in the production of such materials. On the first question, a very quick comment. I think I agree entirely that since the image of the other is formed at a very young age, we need to start education very early. All I want to add to that is to say that this education must not only be education about the other, encountering the other in a textbook or in some kind of academic material, but encountering the other in his or her real life, being with the other, learning from the other, seeing reality through the eyes of the other.
Right.
Okay, yeah. I think on this issue about education and youth and also the text writing, I think that maybe this is a good timing for me to introduce the foundation of the project I established. It's called Wooden Fish project. A lot of people ask me what does it mean and what are you doing. From year 2002, when I was at the visiting scholar at Harvard, and I started to bring the students, college students in the West, mainly in America and in Canada, and of course also from the Europe as well. I started to bring the student to Taiwan and this year in China to stay in the monastery and doing the meditation and learn about the Buddhist history and philosophy. Of course, I mean, the students who come, basically they are, come from all kinds of background, no religious background or from Islam or Judaism or Christianity. So this year, I bring them to kind of in the setting in China and help them to be kind of a first-hand experience at the different culture. And this year, I have a student, his mother is from Egypt, and the father is a Caucasian in United States, and his father is the producer of a documentary program at the PBS. And this student shared with his experience. This is exactly what he said. He said, I feel kind of ashamed about the education in United States because he said, when I up to the 19 years old, this is my first time contact with Eastern philosophy. And I find the Eastern philosophy is somehow more holistic. And I don't think that the Eastern philosophy can totally, completely adapt in American culture. However, if we would like to have a healthy growth, we need to include the Eastern thinking and the philosophy or even the practice. This is exactly what you were saying. So I think that we need to be invite more value and into the writing of the text. Thank you. Thank you.
Sheikh.
في الحقيقة أن تعليم الأطفال أو تعليم النشء صورة الآخر قد تكون مهمة جدا بأن نعلمهم صورة الآخر بشكل إيجابي، لأنه ممكن أن تعلم صورة الآخر بصور مختلفة. وبالتالي هناك مثل يقول إن الإنسان هو عدو لما يجهله. بطبيعة الإنسان أن يكون معادياً لكل شيء يجهله، وبالتالي كيف نقدم لهم الآخر؟ لكن من زاوية ومنظور أشمل، وهو منظور السلام، بمعنى أنه علينا أن ندرس الطلاب ضرورة السلام في هذا العصر والوئام، لأن يقولون لولا الوئام لهلك الأنام، وبدون هذا السلام ستكون الحروب دائمة حتى بين الأسرة الواحدة. وأرى أنه من الضروري أن نعلم السلام لأبنائنا. لست حريصاً على المدارس الابتدائية، لكن لكني حريص على من يقومون بتوجيه المجتمع وبتوجيه المدارس وبالنخبة. هذه النخبة تحتاج إلى دورات كثيرة عن السلام وأن تتعلم الروحانيات. في الإسلام قبل أن نعلم الآخر علينا أن نتعلم ما يسمى بالصوفية. طبعا هنا ربما الصوفية عند بعض الإخوة عندها مفهوم لا أريده، أنا أريد تزكية النفوس، أن لا تظن بأحد إلا خيرا، أن تحب الناس جميعا لأنهم خلق الله، يعد جميع الناس مولا لأنهم على ما قضاه الله ويجرون أفعلا كما يقول الشاطبي. الناس هم خلق الله يتصرفون بقضاء الله، فأنت تعتبرهم إخوانا جميعا، بمعنى أن هذه الروحانية لو تعلمناها لخفت الحروب في داخل الأسرة الإسلامية وفي داخل العالم كله. لكن علي هنا أن أشير إشارة صغيرة، هو أن الأمر لا بد أن يكون متبادلا. لتعلم في المدارس الشرقية عليك أن تعلم أيضا في المدارس الغربية. لا يمكن أن يكون سلكتيف، لا يمكن أن يكون انتقائيا. تعلم هؤلاء صورة الآخر بينما الآخر يعلمهم صورة أخرى. هذه بلية كبيرة، وبالتالي لن توقف العدوان. وشكرا.
Thank you, Professor Tamins.
Yes, I think education of children is absolute key, and here I'd say from the Catholic tradition, perhaps one of the greatest contributions of the Church in intercultural dialogue as well as interreligious dialogue is the establishment of Catholic schools where in areas of the world, in Asia and Africa, that I've looked at, over 80% of the students are actually non-Catholic. And so the resources of education are made available in the context of the moral development of the person. So I think it's a very important, but if I may be permitted to say something on the Islamic side and suggest a friendly amendment to Dr. Nizami's statement about how belief is really about ourselves, it's quite extraordinary to learn from Al-Ghazali, for example, in his Ayyuha Walad, where Al-Ghazali speaks about the education of the child with awareness of God. And so that it's not the sovereignty of the self, as in Western education, and the dismantling of tradition that is at the core of Islamic education, but this awareness that there is a presence, there's a creator, and that knowledge should be undertaken with this moral purpose in mind. And I don't think that's in conflict, by the way, with the secular, with a kind of Miltonian understanding of education. I think it can complement it so that education on behalf of the other, on behalf of the community, seems to me to be a wonderful way to bring the resources of spirit and mind to bear on the education of children.
Regarding the education of children, I think it's crucial to combine both in the formal and the informal setting the exposure to others, not just the image of the other, but to others. So whether it's through these multi-perspective textbooks that are being created, or through actual meetings and encounters with people of other faiths. Emmanuel Levinas, a Jewish philosopher, speaks about the significance of seeing another person, and that introduces a certain obligation we have to other people, and that actual meeting is the point of that obligation. So it's important to expose children in particular before they develop a sense of fear, or before their stereotypes about others become too ingrained, that we actually expose them to other people. In Jewish education, we struggle a lot because we want children to be very familiar with their own tradition. But we do have to balance this sense of belonging, that we want them to feel like they belong to Judaism with knowing that they belong to a much wider community, a global community with people of many different faiths and traditions and cultural backgrounds. And I think the only way we can really combine both of those things is through exposure to other people and allowing people to learn, allowing children to learn about themselves and other people through that meeting. So.
Thank you. I think I may have the time for just one final round of questions. And I do apologize on behalf of the organizers if we are not able to include everyone's questions, but time is pressing. I'll combine these two because I think perhaps one can take these together. Question one, global corporations and local small and medium enterprises are highly influential and can also be partners for dialogue. Adopting inclusive policies and marketing principles that emphasize dialogue. How can we as a group reach out to them and get them to build bridges of dialogue to welcome the other? What could the role be of big corporations in promoting dialogue? And the other question, the image of the other has been discussed at other interfaith conferences before, and recommendations have been made. But how can we encourage governments to implement the recommendations made at this conference? Perhaps this time I'll start with you.
Oh, sure. I'll answer the second part first, which is I think each of us has a responsibility to bring what we discuss here back to our home communities. We are representing smaller and larger communities, and we have an obligation to teach this to either our colleagues in the workforce or our students if we are educators, or our congregants if we are religious leaders. And we have to talk about the experiences that we've had here and the people that we've met and the dialogue that we've produced and share that with everybody back at home and create working groups so that we can start implementing some of the things that we're talking about here. It has to start on a community level. And then to turn to the global issue, I think it also has to happen on an individual level, to speak to those representatives of these global corporations and share with them what we've learned here.
Yes, I think it's, since I know so little about the world of commerce and business, maybe I should start there. A businessman in America told me that what's really important for his business, and he's fairly successful, is treating the customer right. The customer, he says, is absolute key to what I do. If I get a product out and it's not right, I want to hear back from the customer and make it right. No expense is too much to do that, he said to me. I know another fellow who is on Wall Street, fairly successful, and before the crash, he was fairly worried about the grabbing mentality that he found among his colleagues. And he wondered whether there's a way in which we can get back to Adam Smith, who was primarily a moral philosopher, and use a kind of moral vision for business that would, I think, relate very well to concerns with dialogue, for example, that we have here, that is a two-way process, not a one-way process, that people are not commodities, but they are human beings as well. The other thing about education, I told my students a little bit about KAICIID. They are very interested. Shortly after 9/11, some of my students who went to teach in schools in West Virginia and Tennessee and other places came back to me to say that students were very afraid of the image of Islam, that Islam was a religion to be afraid of, but that they were glad that they were in the classroom to assure the students that Islam is nothing like what they imagine. The fact that they were in the classroom gave the students a sense of ease. It really helped the students to say, well, I can trust this teacher, and therefore I can listen to what this teacher has to say. All this is by way of saying that it's absolutely critical that we make operational the ideas and values we develop in our dialogue meetings, And the best ways to do that is to get this material into our schools. And there are many ways to do this, the creation of syllabi, for example, with textbooks, maybe with preliminary material discussion about the meaning of dialogue and the intention of dialogue. So I think our work is cut out for us.
يبدو لي أن بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بأن المسألة توصيل ما نصل إليه أو توصيل الفهم الذي عندنا هذا أمر مشكل كبير. أنا يعني عندي مركز وأشتغل في شيء أسميه التأصيل، لكن بقي التوصيل بمعنى يمكن أن نقدم النظريات الجيدة، لكن هذه النظريات لا تصل إلى الفاعلين، إلى الذين يجب أن يستعملوا هذه النظريات، أن يتعاملوا معها، أن يقوموا بتطبيق هذه النظريات على أرض الواقع. هذا سؤال مهم جدا. لكن علينا أن نقرر أولاً أن الدين هو كالطاقة. الطاقة يمكن أن تصنع منها شيئاً عظيماً بحيث تضخ المياه وتنبت الحدائق الغناء الخضراء، ولكن يمكن أيضاً أن تعمل منها قنبلة تهلك الناس. فالمسألة أن الدين، استعمال الدين هو قضية فيها إشكال كبير. الذي يمكن أن نقوم به هنا هو البحث عن القيم المشتركة، وهنا ما قاله البروفيسور قبلي، أن نبحث عن القيم. هذه القيم أن نقدمها للناس من خلال الإعلام، من خلال المؤسسات المختلفة، من خلال مختلف المجامع، أن نقدم القيم التي تدعو إلى السلام، تدعو إلى إنهاء الحروب. وإن كان يعني ما قلته قبل قليل في سبينوزا عندما قال إن السلام ليس أن تضع الحرب أوزارها، بمعنى ليس عدم الحرب، وإنما السلام هو اتحاد في الأرواح. كيف نصل إلى اتحاد الأرواح إذا لم يكن السلام؟ القلوب تكون طاهرة من العداوة، الأيدي طاهرة من القتل، الألسن طاهرة من الكلام. يعني هذا هو المثال الصوفي، وهو الذي جاء في من سلم الناس من لسانه، المسلمون أو الناس، الحديث فيه الناس، من لسانه ويده. فالسلام من اللسان ومن اليد ومن القلب، هذا هو مثال السلام، أن يكون القلب طاهراً، لا ترى في الناس إلا خيراً، كلهم خلق الله، هذا خلق الله، وهذا جمال، أن تكون زينة، أن يكون الناس مختلفون، أحدهم عمتي وعمة الأخ أعتقد الهندوسي أيضاً، فهذه عمائمنا هكذا يعني تختلف، فيكون جمالاً وليس عداوة. هذه هي القيم التي يجب أن نوصلها بمختلف طرق التوصيل، وبخاصة من خلال وزارات التعليم ومن خلالات وزارات الحرب أيضاً التي تشن الحروب بناء على الاختلاف. وشكرا.
Okay. I'm going to speak it from kind of as grow up in the Chinese culture, even though I myself study and teach in Buddhism in United States for 24 years. And regarding the issue about educate cooperation, I think it's very important to educate religious leaders, because in Chinese culture, a lot of the owner or the founders of a co-op, they always have a kind of some way of a belief, even in Buddhism or Taoism. So they are willing to have a donation or a gift, but they also follow their religious, spiritual teachers' advice. So right now I spend more time in China, and recently I'm invited by a co-op. They are building a Buddhist center, and they only can establish the facility, what we call the hardware, but they need the software. That means that they need the religious teacher, expert to be there. So I think that, in order to teach them, I think it's very important to teach the religious leader first. Just like I myself, I come here to be educated. I have been in this religious dialogue. I enjoy a lot because I feel it's a great education for myself. And regarding the government, a lot of people maybe would like to know about what is the situation in mainland China right now. I think that people have a kind of stereotype about mainland China, but I myself, recently I put myself in China and I see there was a hope. I'm very promising, the way I see it in China. Of course, right now in China, all of the religion are struggling for like a survival or revival. So very interesting when I'm myself in China, when I talk about interfaith dialogue, it looks like a strange the thought, our term for them, but I think it will take time. So, it's in the future, I think that it's going to be more open up for all the faith. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All of your questions are very profound and certainly deserve much more time than any of us can give. So in the interest of time, I just want to make two brief comments on each of the questions. I think that global corporations are important partners in this project with us. And the globalization of our world economy should be seen by us as special opportunities for working with such corporations. But I think that our religious traditions have something very vital to bring also to the corporate world, even as we seek to partner with them. And what we need to really bring to them, which is a value I think we all shared and many spoke about it already, is the vision of the human being as having intrinsic value and not merely instrumental value. Corporations tend to see human beings as having instrumental value. So we need to bring an intrinsic value to the business world, something I think that we can stand together with and would build good partnerships with them. On the issue of the state, I think it's a very long history. The history of religion and the state has also been a problematic history. But I think that that interreligious dialogue and the possibilities of interreligious dialogue, and especially cooperation among religious traditions, will put religious traditions in a very special place to engage the state. The state is often afraid of religion. The state is often worried by religion, especially in dealing with single religions. But when religions can speak with a common voice in engaging the state, I think it gives religion a very special power and appeal to the state. So the transformation that is possible in our relationships, putting our own house in order through dialogue and cooperative relationships, empowers us and strengthens us, I think, in the possibilities of what we can do with the state.
Well, thank you very much. It's quite obvious we can go on for much longer, but we have already taken more time than was allocated to us. It remains for me to thank our panelists for their very thoughtful presentations, for making us reflect upon the sources of tolerance in our belief systems, and how that belonging that I was referring to could be based in our belief, and when it is challenged, the tolerance that arises is also based in a genuine belief. And I think the work that the King Abdullah Center is doing in this respect, we hope it would encourage us to create those bridges which will be strong enough to overcome the challenges that we face. Well, thank you very much, and please join me in thanking our panelists.